Welcome to Stoic Mind, where we explore ancient wisdom from modern living. Today, we're diving into the heart of Stoicism and the pursuit of self-mastery. How to think like a Roman emperor, the Stoic philosophy of Marcus Aurelius.
The Roman Emperor Marcus Aurelius lies dying in bed at his military camp in Vindobona, modern-day Vienna. 6 days ago he was stricken with a fever, and the symptoms have been worsening rapidly. It's clear to his physicians that he's finally about to succumb to the great Antonine Plague, probably a strain of smallpox, which has been ravaging the empire for the past 14 years. Marcus is nearly 60 and physically frail, and all the signs show he's unlikely to recover. However, to the physicians and courtiers present, he seems strangely calm, almost indifferent. He has been preparing for this moment most of his life. The Stoic philosophy he follows has taught him to practice contemplating his own mortality calmly and rationally. To learn how to die, according to the Stoics, is to unlearn how to be a slave. This philosophical attitude towards death didn't come naturally to Marcus. His father passed away when Marcus was only a few years old, leaving him a solemn child. When he reached 17, he was adopted by the Emperor Antoninus Pius as part of a long-term succession plan devised by his predecessor Hadrian, who had foreseen the potential for wisdom and greatness in Marcus, even as a small boy. Nevertheless, he had been most reluctant to leave his mother's home for the imperial palace. Antoninus summoned the finest teachers of rhetoric and philosophy to train Marcus in preparation for succeeding him as emperor. Among his tutors were experts on Platonism and Aristotelianism, but his main philosophical education was in Stoicism. These men became like family to him. When one of his most beloved tutors died, it's said that Marcus wept so violently that the palace servants tried to restrain him. They were worried that people would find his behavior unbecoming of a future ruler. However, Antoninus told them to leave Marcus alone. Let him be only a man for once, for neither philosophy nor empire takes away natural feeling. Years later, after having lost several young children, Marcus was once again moved to tears in public while presiding over a legal case when he heard an advocate say in the course of his argument, "Blessed are they who died in the plague." Marcus was a naturally loving and affectionate man, deeply affected by loss. Over the course of his life, he increasingly turned to the ancient precepts of Stoicism as a way of coping when those closest to him were taken. Now, as he lies dying, he reflects once again on those he has lost. A few years earlier, the Empress Faustina, his wife of 35 years, passed away. He lived long enough to see 8 of their 13 children die. 4 of his 8 daughters survived, but only 1 of his 5 sons. Commodus. Death was everywhere though. During Marcus's reign, millions of Romans throughout the empire had been killed by war or disease. The two went hand in hand, as the legionary camps were particularly vulnerable to outbreaks of plague, especially during the long winter months. The air around him is still thick with the sweet smell of frankincense, which the Romans vainly hoped might help prevent the spread of the disease. For over a decade now, the scent of smoke and incense had been a reminder to Marcus that he was living under the shadow of death, that survival from one day to the next should never be taken for granted. Infection with the plague wasn't always fatal. However, Marcus's celebrated court physician Galen had observed that victims inevitably die when their feces turn black, a sign of intestinal bleeding. Perhaps that's how Marcus's doctors know he's dying. Or maybe they just realise how frail he's become with age. Throughout his adult life, he had been prone to chronic chest and stomach pains and bouts of illness. His appetite had always been poor. Now he voluntarily rejects food and drink to hasten his own demise. Socrates used to say that death is like some prankster in a scary mask, dressed as a bogeyman to frighten small children. The wise man carefully removes the mask and, looking behind it, he finds nothing worth fearing. Because of this lifelong preparation, now that his death finally draws near, Marcus is no more afraid of it than when it seemed far away. He therefore asks his physicians to describe patiently and in detail what's happening inside his body, so that he may contemplate his own symptoms with the studied indifference of a natural philosopher. His voice is weak, and the sores in his mouth and throat make it difficult for him to speak. Before long he grows tired and gestures for them to leave, wishing to continue his meditations in private. Alone in his room, as he listens to the sound of his own wheezing, he doesn't feel much like an emperor anymore, just a feeble old man, sick and dying. He turns his head to one side and catches a glimpse of his reflection on the polished surface of the goddess Fortuna's golden statuette by his bedside. His Stoic tutors advised him to practice a mental exercise when he noticed his own image. It's a way of building emotional resilience by training yourself to come to terms with your own mortality. Focusing his eyes weakly on his reflection, he tries to imagine one of the long-dead Roman emperors who preceded him gazing back. First he pictures Antoninus, his adoptive father, and then his adoptive grandfather, the Emperor Hadrian. He even imagines his reflection slowly assuming the features depicted in paintings and sculptures of Augustus, who founded the empire 2 centuries earlier. As he does so, Marcus silently asks himself, "Where are they now?" and whispers the answer, "Nowhere," or at least nowhere of which we can speak. He continues to meditate patiently, albeit drowsily, on the mortality of the emperors who preceded him. There's nothing left of any of them now but bones and dust. Their once illustrious lives have gradually become insignificant to subsequent generations, who have already half forgotten them. Even their names sound old, evoking memories of another era. As a boy, the Emperor Hadrian had befriended Marcus, and the two used to go boar hunting together. Now there are young officers under Marcus's command, for whom Hadrian is just a name in the history books, his real, living body long ago replaced by lifeless portraits and statues. Antoninus, Hadrian, Augustus, all equally dead and gone. Everyone from Alexander the Great, right down to his lowly mule driver, ends up lying under the same ground. King and pauper alike, the same fate ultimately awaits everyone. This train of thought is rudely interrupted by a bout of coughing that brings up blood and tissue from the ulceration at the back of his throat. The pain and discomfort of his fever vie for his attention, but Marcus turns this into another part of the meditation. He tells himself that he's just another one of these dead men. Soon he'll be nothing more than a name alongside theirs in the history books, and one day, even his name will be forgotten. This is how he contemplates his own mortality, using one of the many centuries-old Stoic exercises learned in his youth. Once we truly accept our own demise as an inescapable fact of life, it makes no more sense for us to wish for immortality than to long for bodies as hard as diamonds, or to be able to soar on the wings of a bird. As long as we can grasp the truth firmly enough that certain misfortunes are inevitable, we no longer feel the need to worry about them, nor do we yearn for things that we accept are impossible, as long as we can see with crystal clarity that it is futile to do so. As death is among the most certain things in life, to a man of wisdom, it should be among the least feared. Although Marcus first began training in philosophy when he was just a boy of about 12, his practice intensified in his mid-20s when he dedicated himself wholeheartedly to becoming a Stoic. Since then, he has rehearsed his Stoic exercises daily, trained his mind and body to obey reason, and progressively transformed himself, both as a man and a ruler, into something approaching the Stoic ideal. He has tried to develop his own wisdom and resilience systematically, modelling himself after the philosophers who shared their teachings with him, and the other great men who won his admiration, foremost among them, Antoninus. He studied the way they met different forms of adversity with calm dignity. He carefully observed how they lived in accord with reason and exhibited the cardinal virtues of wisdom, justice, fortitude, and temperance. They felt the pain of loss, but did not succumb to it. Marcus has been bereaved so many times, has practiced his response to it so often, that he no longer weeps uncontrollably. He no longer cries, "Why?" and "How could this happen?" or even entertain such thoughts. He has firmly grasped the truth that death is both a natural and inevitable part of life. Now that his time has come, he welcomes it with a philosophical attitude. You might even say that he has learned to befriend death. He still sheds tears and mourns losses, but as a wise man does, he no longer adds to his natural grief by complaining and shaking his fist at the universe. Since completing his journal of reflections on philosophy several years earlier, Marcus has been passing through the final stage of a lifelong spiritual journey. Now lying in pain and discomfort, nearing the end, he gently reminds himself that he has already died many times along the way. First of all, Marcus the child died as he entered the imperial palace as heir to the throne, assuming the title Caesar after Hadrian passed away. After Antoninus passed away, Marcus the young Caesar had to die when he took his place as Emperor of Rome. Leaving Rome behind to take command of the northern legions during the Marcomannic Wars signalled another death, a transition to a life of warfare and a sojourn in a foreign land. Now as an old man, he faces his death not for the first time, but for the last. From the moment we're born, we're constantly dying, not only with each stage of life, but also one day at a time. Our bodies are no longer the ones to which our mothers gave birth, as Marcus put it. Nobody is the same person he was yesterday. Realizing this makes it easier to let go. We can no more hold on to life than grasp the waters of a rushing stream. Now Marcus is growing drowsy and on the verge of drifting off, but he rouses himself with some effort and sits up in his bed. He has unfinished business to attend to. He orders the guards to send in the members of his family and his inner circle of courtiers, the friends of the emperor, who have been summoned to his camp. Though he appears frail and has suffered from illness throughout his life, Marcus is famously resilient. He has seemed on the verge of dying before, but this time the physicians have confirmed to him that he is unlikely to survive. Everyone senses that the end is near. He bids farewell to his beloved friends, his sons-in-law, and his 4 remaining daughters. He would have kissed each one of them, but the plague forces them to keep their distance. His son-in-law Pompeianus, his right-hand man and senior general during the Marcomannic Wars, is there as always. His lifelong friend, Aufidius Victorinus, another one of his generals, is also present, as are Bruttius Praesens, the father-in-law of Commodus, and another of his sons-in-law, Gnaeus Claudius Severus, a close friend and fellow philosopher. They gather solemn-faced around his bed. Marcus stresses to them that they must take good care of Commodus, his only surviving son, who has ruled by his side as his junior co-emperor for the past 3 years. He has appointed the best teachers available for him, but their influence is waning. Commodus became emperor when he was only 16. Marcus had to wait until he was 40. Young rulers, such as the Emperor Nero, tend to be easily corrupted, and Marcus can see that his son is already falling in with bad company. He asks his friends, especially Pompeianus, to do him the honour of ensuring that Commodus's moral education continues as if he were their own son. Marcus appointed Commodus his official heir, granting him the title Caesar when he was just 5 years old. Commodus's younger brother, Marcus Annius Verus, was also named Caesar, but he died shortly thereafter. Marcus had hoped that the 2 boys would rule jointly one day. Any succession plan Marcus agreed with the Senate were always going to be precarious. However, at the height of the plague, as the First Marcomannic War broke out, it was necessary for Rome's stability to have a designated heir in case a usurper tried to seize the throne. During a previous bout of illness 5 years earlier, rumours spread that Marcus had already passed away. His most powerful general in the eastern provinces, Avidius Cassius, was acclaimed emperor by the Egyptian legion, triggering a short-lived civil war. Marcus immediately had Commodus rushed from Rome to the northern frontier to assume the toga virilis, marking his official passage to adulthood. After the rebellion was put down, Marcus continued to accelerate the process of appointing Commodus emperor. If Marcus had died without an heir, another civil war would probably have ensued. Likewise, replacing Commodus with a substitute ruler at this stage would leave the whole empire vulnerable. The northern tribes might seize the opportunity to renew their attacks,